On our call, you'll hear about ways to harness the power of storytelling and tap into compelling visuals to draw on your audience with materials that make a real impact. And we have two fantastic trainers who I'll introduce in just a minute. But first, I want to frame our conversation with a few quick remarks. So today's webinar and all of our CEDS-related trainings and resources we develop at the NADO Research Foundation are created through our Stronger CEDS, Stronger Regions program, which is generously funded through the U.S. Economic Development Administration. And I can't thank EDA staff enough for their support and guidance with this work. They have been true partners in this effort. And I'd like to say that we are all really fortunate to be working on the comprehensive economic development strategies at this particular point in time, when EDA has really empowered districts and regions to make the CEDS process and document more inclusive, more engaging, and more interesting than ever before. And with the release of the CEDS content guidelines in 2015, we have entered what I like to call a golden age for the CEDS, where we are seeing some really transformative efforts underway in both the planning and implementation of the CEDS. And so some of you on the call today may recall the CEDS documents of the past is illustrated on the left side of the screen. A giant binder full of text, charts, and statistics, but had little life and personality. And the new CEDS that were being created today are visually engaging and are meant for public consumption. So note the infographics, maps, videos, and more on the right side. And that's what we'll be hearing more about in today's webinar, tools and techniques to make your regions and CEDS and other plans really come alive and speak to your community. So I just want to note that all of our CEDS-related training materials are available online and for free at the website cedscentral.com. And there you'll find webinar recordings like this one, presentation slides, case studies, and videos on all things CEDS, including a CEDS 101 section for those of you who are new to the CEDS process. And today's webinar won't get into the details of the required sections and nuts and bolts of the CEDS, but we do have lots of resources and materials on those topics archived online. And of course, please be in touch with any of your CEDS questions or ideas. I'd love to hear what you're working on and help continue to nurture this national CEDS community of practice that is advancing the practice of regional economic development across the country. So a few quick webinar logistics. Again, thank you so much to EDA for making this all happen. If you have any questions for our presenters, please type them on the chat box on the right side of your screen. We're going to try to get to as many of those questions at the end of the presentation. And always a popular question is if this is being recorded and slides will be available, and of course they will, hopefully up by tomorrow at our website, nado.org, and also at cedscentral.com. And of course, please be in touch with me afterwards if you have any questions about our program, the NADO Research Foundation, and other efforts. So with that, let's get to our main event. We have two fantastic trainers on today's webinar who I've had the privilege of knowing for quite a few years, and are really excited they'll be able to share their knowledge and expertise with you. They're Erica Allison and Derek Stipe of Formation PR and Brand, based in Hendersonville, North Carolina. So Erica Allison started the agency in 2007 and is the team's lead PR strategist and crisis communication expert. She also sets the tone for branding campaigns, writes communication plans, and routinely consults with clients on communication strategy. Erica also mentors her team to do more of the above as she guides Formation into the next phase of business development. And Derek Stipe began working for Formation in 2011 as a subcontractor, eventually joined the team in 2014 as a creative director. He's crafted thousands of logos, ads, and print pieces. And Derek works closely with Erica to create the visual identity that becomes a client's brand cornerstone, then collaborates and leads the team in applying those standards on all print and digital media produced. So with that, I'll turn things over to Erica and Derek for their presentation, and I'll be back for Q&A at the end, but really looking forward to this. And Erica and Derek, take it away.
Thanks, Brett. And for short, you can just call us Derek.
I guess it almost sounded like that.
It does.
Dynamic duo here, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
We are happy to be here with you guys today and talk about the art of the narrative. Even though you're focusing primarily on CEDS, there are also other reports and plans that you're going to want to add some flair to, and hopefully Derek and I will be able to give you some good strategies and tactics today, including low-cost or free tools that are available out there that you might want to use. So just a little bit about Formation PR and Brand. We are a full-service PR and branding firm. We're in Western North Carolina, and we have the great joy of working with lots of regional councils of governments, planning and development commissions, all of the alphabet of acronyms that you all entail across the country. You do great work, and it's important to us that we help you communicate that, which dovetails nicely with our mission, which is really all about listening to our clients in order to create amazing work. And along the way, we hope to empower our clients and our partners so that together we can have a positive impact in the world. And empowerment is a big part and reason of why we do this sort of work, like a webinar or workshops or trainings that we lead. We want to make sure that we're imparting some of our knowledge and best practices along the way with you all, so that together we really are able to make a positive impact in the world around us. Brett introduced us. There we are again. If you flip us around, it's Derica. And I don't know that there's anything else to say about us.
He did a great job introducing us, so it's great.
We can talk about our favorite tacos.
We only have 45 minutes.
Yeah, okay. We're here all day. Okay, so getting started. For us, we want to make sure we're really clear on CEDS overview. And I love that image that Brett showed at the beginning of the big binder, because that's really what my original understanding of CEDS was when I first started working with Land and Sky Regional Council in Asheville. They were just beginning to do that sort of work, and it very much was about the binder and the stuff and the reporting. And so just as a refresher, we wanted to make sure we're clear on what your expectations are today. So we visited the very helpful, content-heavy EDA site, and then we also found Brett's site, or the Research Foundation site of CEDS Central, which I hope you all are using, and then went back to basics, which is where we should all start, with the question of what is a CEDS? And there was a great line or definition on the EDA site, I believe, that just talks about what it is. It's a strategy-driven plan for regional economic development. I'm not telling you all anything you don't know, but it's helpful to start with that and have all of us on the same page. Strategy-driven is important, and also understanding who it's for your region, and why it's for economic development. So to get started in developing a strong narrative, we have to start with the end in mind and ask, what is it that we want someone to do as a result of reading this report? Obviously, you have to do it as part of your requirements, and it has to check some boxes for EDA and for funders. But what else do we need to think about? We need to think about who else is reading it. EDA and funders, we've mentioned. Your elected officials throughout your region are probably reading it and using it because it's very helpful to them, and it's something that's important in the work that you're doing. Economic developers are going to reference this document, your community stakeholders, and business owners. And as you start at the top of that list and work your way down, the amount of familiarity and knowledge level that people have with that document begins to fade. So at the very top, EDA funders, elected officials even, maybe they may have a high level of familiarity and knowledge and expertise with this. Even economic developers have some understanding of the language you're using, but when you start looking at your community stakeholders and business owners who could have great value or learn something from your document, they may not understand really what you're saying in it. And so it's important for us to think about who's reading it, and then more importantly, why should they care? It's interesting to think about at a very basic level, all CEDS are the same, right? No?
No, I wouldn't say they are.
No. And so it's the age-old mansplaining that's we turned on its head here, where the guy is not explaining to the lady that they're different. It's the lady saying, seriously, no, they're not different. They're kind of like the cars that you would drive. So it's kind of like the basic elements are the same, the contents are the same. Just like with a car, you need the four wheels, you need the steering wheel, you need the seat and the doors. But that little tiny pink one at the top is probably going to get you there to the same place that really fast green one might behind you, but you're going to get there a lot faster with one, or one looks flashier, but you may only be able to carry one friend as opposed to 5 or 6 in the big brown Suburban. So they are basically the same, but they're different. So going beyond the usual suspects for you all should mean going beyond that list that we just went over of who reads your documents. So I would encourage you, if you have a pen and paper now, to think about who else might we be missing, and are we missing someone, and jot down their name. Jot down someone who may not know that they even need to look at your document or your report, and that might get value out of it. Because when you start to begin to identify who should read it and why, you can begin to craft and create a report that actually has more impact. And it looks different, it feels different, and it's catering to what that particular audience wants to read about or cares to read about. So taking it beyond the report, one of the things that we want to make sure we're understanding about the CEDS when you're using it, you don't want to, you go through a lot of work, you go through a lot of community engagement, you go through a lot of research and data gathering and analysis. You want to make sure that all that work is useful beyond that one initial purpose. So we want to think about if we're maybe overlooking a potential use or goal. Is there something else we could be using this information for? Is there someone else we can be talking to? And along those lines, thinking about who we're talking to, asking the question of, should it be displayed or communicated differently? Thank goodness the binders aren't as much of the norm anymore as they once were. They probably are still being used by some folks, but there are so many different ways that we can display or communicate our CEDS plans differently. And ideally they're on your website, but sometimes they're hard to find, or they might be called something different. I mean, other than the people at EDA, NADO, and people intimately involved with your process, how many people really know what a CEDS is? So it's important to, when you can, call it what it really is. So if it is a regional economic development strategy, if it really is something that is going to resonate more with your community, if you were just to call it something else on your website, you can do that. You don't have to say this is the CEDS or it's some acronym that people may not understand or recognize. So again, I'm going beyond the report and where you have to submit that to EDA, but thinking about displaying it on your website in a way that is very easy to understand and different. So that's just one level. Looking at a few others, we're going to look at content strategies, and we're going to look at visual strategies to get you a little bit closer to having a narrative that has stronger impact beyond just your EDA and your funders and that top level of folks that we talked about, has an impact with other folks. So how do we have content that really resonates and that conveys a message? Well, for starters, we have to have more targeted messaging. I went through a lot of CEDS online in preparation for this webinar, and I have to say you all have a lot to say, which is good. You have a lot of work that you're doing, but sometimes your message can get lost in all of that, especially if you are trying to display it or share it on your website. So you want to make sure your content says what it needs to say, but relies on the old adage of less is more. Because when you have less content visually and just from a recognition and a digestion, if you will, level from the reader, they're going to be able to digest that. They're going to be able to read it and want to read more. And if you have visited websites or read documents lately, we're right now in annual report mode for multiple clients. And when we're laying out that document for them, even though you have tremendous impactful stories, we're always trying to push our clients to edit, and not write every single thing that happened, because when someone opens up that report and just glances at it, and we are a culture of glancers now, we don't actually read, we skim and we glance at things, they're not going to want to read it. So you don't want to waste all that effort in putting all that content in there if they're not going to read it. So try and edit yourself as much as you can. Other tactics that kind of cross over into visual and content strategies, again, based on some of the reports that I saw online, I didn't know where the key headings were. I didn't know where one section began and another ended. And so it's a really easy tactic and approach to use, just to bold those key headings. Make sure that that's a visual cue for the reader that we're moving into a different section now, or I've got something important that I need to take a look at because it's bold. Maybe the font size is larger, as Derek has put on this particular slide, and I'm able to recognize instantly, okay, I need to slow down and there's something I need to pay attention to here. And really, these are simple things, and it's not that you don't already know this, but sometimes when we're in this mode of creating a report, we might forget, or you've got someone working on it who isn't thinking in this way. So you want to make sure you're thinking about who's reading it and how, as a society, do we digest information.
Right, and like you were saying earlier, thinking about your audience, and the audience being maybe not everyone is as well versed as you are in the CEDS report, and you know, guiding the eye through the content that you want to take them through. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes.
And also having someone else in your organization, or even outside your organization, read through it and let you know if you've got duplicative copy, because sometimes we have a tendency to say one thing several different ways in a couple of sections, and so you don't want to fall into that trap either. So having someone else review it is a helpful item. And then it's always important to bullet copy, to break it up, because if we're just constantly writing in paragraph form and always just kind of in this prose sort of approach, we're going to have our viewer or our reader hop off. They're going to move on. And I was sharing this example with, I think, Brett and Derek the other day, where I get a daily email newsletter, and I used to read the Skim, which was clever, and it had cute bold headings, and it had digestible information. It's just a aggregate sort of news site. It's pulling in interesting articles, and it's items of interest that most people want to read. And I've now moved away from that because it takes me too long to read it in the morning, to CNN's 5 things, because it's just 5 things, and that's all I can do. And that's terrible. I write for a living, I read constantly, but as a society and a culture, we're all stretched as far as our attention span goes. And so people want digestible information. And with those sort of email newsletter examples I gave you, there's always a link to hop off and learn more, and I can read a more in-depth article, and usually I do, but people want that at-a-glance bulleted information.
And you can communicate so much more and provide a bit of visual panache, if you will, just using colorful charts and infographics to communicate data rather than a table or again, paragraph form. Images are exciting. They can grab your attention, but sometimes maybe that's a little bit difficult for you to create your own infographics. So we wanted to just highlight a few online tools. Here was some tools on we can provide these links for you after the fact as well, but here's several online services that are very helpful in creating the visuals that can provide more interest. One of those I've had some experience with, and with help clients that didn't necessarily want to pay to have something designed, but wanted to have a quality end product. Canva is very good for that sort of thing, and these other ones all have their own kind of specialty and a product that they can provide.
And one that we didn't add there, it's not so much an infographic, but a tool for creating charts and tables. And we just were turned on to this recently by Kevin Bird at New River Valley, is Tableau, which is Tableau, which I bet most of you on the call here are already using or you're familiar with it. I think there was a session on it at DDAA conference, but I think these are just going to only increase in the number of tools available out there, and they're quite affordable or free. So I think it's a matter of trying it out and seeing what works. I can tell you that I had a moment where I felt like my mother about half an hour ago, where I was trying to use PowerPoint, which I used to be able to use and have since moved away from that Keynote, and I was trying to create a presentation for my client and had a little bit of a meltdown because I couldn't quite get what I needed to do out of that. But the point of that and sharing that with you is that find something that works for you, that is not going to challenge you or eat up a lot of your time. So you may have to experiment at first to find the right one, but find something that works and that you feel comfortable with if you're the one doing it or your staff does. And if they can go online, there are all kinds of tutorials online on how to use these items. I think that would be time well spent. Another tactic when we're looking at content and trying to make it visually appealing.
Call out quotes can help make an impact in your communication.
Said Derek just now. So those are really silly on our part to say it like that, but it makes the point, and we just are going through this again. I mentioned with annual report design we're working on. When you have a lot of content or text on a page, there's usually one or two nuggets in there that really help make your point. And if you can just, when we say a call out quote, that just means make it bigger and make it bolder and call attention to it, and that gets your point across. And so people will actually want to read the rest of what's around it if they know that you've called out that quote. So maybe they want to know why, and they want to read more.
And from a visual standpoint, it can really help break up a large body of copy. Again, annual report season, we have organizations that have success stories, and they're great stories, but if you're not immediately pulled in to want to read more, again, people might just skip over it or skim it. But it's good to have like those impactful statements, maybe a lot larger, bolder, a bright color, something that really grabs the attention and makes your reader want to explore the rest of that document. And some folks they're used to getting the same old 8.5 by 11 kind of report, and it's uninteresting when you get a lot of the same. So change it up a little bit. Maybe change it to a horizontal layout, or if you have the capabilities, maybe you could change the size completely and have it printed at a different size than your conventional size letter paper, because it helps to just provide one more level of interest for your end user.
And I will say, when I go from typing my content into a portrait orientation to a landscape orientation, it forces me to edit differently. It forces me to write less sometimes because I'm trying to make it fit a certain size. So it's just a subtle shift, but it's something that can help you in trimming back some of that copy. And yes, you can use PowerPoint. It can work. It can.
Only if you have someone to call.
Only if I have my phone a friend. It can work.
All right, we're going to go into some visual strategies. A lot of these kind of apply to any sort of print collateral, whether it be CEDS report, an annual report, or anything else that you would design. A little bit about our workflow here is Erica's a lot of times works with messaging and kind of honing in on what's important with the content, and then providing that content to me so we can pull out what's important, accentuate the big headlines and the highs, because one of our biggest principles here is if everything is important, then nothing is. And we just had a fun little series of slides here, just a couple to show you. Nothing really sticks out on this page. It's all the same. It kind of runs together. It doesn't draw your eye in at all. But we are trying to just coach you into focusing on what's the sequence of things that you want to draw the reader's eye in. So if we can change it up a little bit. You can change point sizes. You can accentuate certain words with color and really provide importance. Bring the eye to the content you want to read in a way that makes sense. And
I'll say on this point as well, I have seen some folks in reporting do this very thing, but they go a little beyond a consistency in the color treatment or the font treatment. So it's like a rainbow of colors throughout. So I would encourage you, if you're going to do something like this and you want to highlight one word or have a call out quote, keep it consistent as much as you can throughout your report. Or if there are certain segments of the report, maybe, or sections, one section is red or blue and one section is teal or red, and keep it consistent, because those are also visual cues that there's a change in content or a change in topic. But if you're flipping back and forth within a particular section, it's going to cause confusion. So my caveat there is do this, but do it with some consistency in mind. Right, with consistency in mind. It's also important, I mean, your organization is putting this together, so you kind of want it to reflect your brand. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But if you have strong brand colors or a font and things that make sense to use, that provides not only consistency within the report, within the information, but also with your brand of your organization. And again, I feel like this is kind of the same thing, but highlight what matters most. You will have to kind of rank your content. In each section, what's the #1 thing that you want folks to take away? If they don't get a chance to read all of it, what's the most important? Again, with all the different audience members that we talked about earlier, everybody's going to read that differently. So the folks that with the most familiarity may dig in deep, may read the entire report and even go further to find out more online, or follow up with someone that they can learn more. Where your folks that aren't so much dug in, they may have more of a skim mentality when it comes to reading the report. So when we're talking about visuals, one thing we run into a lot of time is just the quality of images. You definitely need to have imagery and photos in your reports, because really it is important to helping and conveying your message, but sometimes we may lack high quality, and you'll know that when it goes to print, it looks all grainy and pixely, or it can't get to a large enough size. So Derek's got a few options. And even if it's of the right size, it's important to look, kind of recognize what makes a high quality photo. It doesn't really matter if it's taken on a high-end camera or an iPhone. There's a lot, obviously a high-end camera can do more, but if you have a good eye for composition, or know someone who does that can take your photos, that makes a big difference. Here's a few options for some high-quality stock images. iStock's a great source, as well as Shutterstock. Those are both pay services. You pay per image or subscription-based, depending on whatever need. Pexels is a free stock photo service, and there's more out there, but maybe entertain the idea of using a stock photo, because stock photos generally have requirements to meet a certain quality level before they're especially put on some of these paid sites. So depending upon budget, or what you can afford to spend, or if you're looking for something free, there are resources out there for you to check those out, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's like 4 pages in essay form that you can communicate right there in one image. For instance, I think we were going to talk about just agriculture. So if we take a look at this image, the composition, it's a very high quality image. It feels very earthy. Someone's working in the fields.
you can actually put yourself in those shoes because it's nondescript. We don't know who that is, but it kind of has a little bit of emotion to it. It feels like, and it just feels dramatic. Where at the same time we have another image that's based in the same family, but the lighting's bad. It's kind of grainy. It feels dark, and even there's no leaves in the tree. It's kind of depressing. So they're just vastly different, even though technically they're similar pictures, similar subject matter. So if you don't have an image that really communicates a lot in the positive for this article or this certain section, sometimes it may be better to not use it and stick to a design element or an important bolding of a headline or a call out quote.
And also, if you look at the other photo, the other image, which could be in any number of locations, and we totally understand and support trying to make sure we get local authentic imagery. But in this particular image, you may have to actually write more to explain what someone is supposed to be looking at. Are they looking at the building to the right? Are they looking at the tractor? What is the impact of this sort of broad brush image? Whereas the one before, you're narrowing the lens, you're focusing more on a feeling or an element. So if it had to do with advanced manufacturing and agriculture, perhaps you zero in on some mechanics involved with an innovative farm equipment or something in the building over there, and you really zero in and do a hyper focus. Like with that one, you're not seeing who that is. That could be a man or a woman. We do get the impression that it's corn, but you don't know exactly what it is, but there's some impact there. With this, you're not quite sure where that impact is supposed to be. So when you're narrowing in your focus and bringing it down, then you're able to get that impact that Derek is talking about.
However, we still want any communication that goes out in your report to be authentic. So I think the important thing is quality, but also if you don't have the best quality images, perhaps a mix of some stock and local images can help communicate it even better than one could on its own. So I'm interestingly enough working on a report now that we were provided not the greatest images, to be honest. I mean, some of them are a little low res, but we found ways to incorporate those images in the report. So each article is directly referencing the image of the person that we're talking about, but also the design isn't impacted as much by the image limitations. So. All right.
So far we've talked about really starting from the beginning with your CEDS and thinking about the end and who we're talking to, looking at your audience and the goals associated with each. What do you want them to do as a result of reading it? Are we missing people? We broaden our idea of who could benefit from your report? You put a lot of work into that, and it impacts your region in a very significant way. I bet there are multiples of groups that haven't had access to this but could. And then keeping in mind some content and visual strategies to make your report pop and make it really something that people want to read and find very, very useful. I know they find it useful as it is now, but they'll be even more apt to go to it with some of these strategies in place. But going beyond that, I want to talk about some communication strategies that factor in the audience and goals that we talked about before. So you want to be able to take, and this is where I like to have this reduce or reuse sort of mentality. Take the CEDS, but now let's start to break it apart. Maybe there are certain elements within it that might warrant having a quick video, and you don't have to have a video that's shot with extra special lighting and audio and all of that. You can just use some still images that you probably used in the report. You could use Tableau for a table, and you could put it together with Animoto. And I don't think we put that on a slide, but it's ANIMOTO. And that's a very easy to use tool to create videos and slideshows. Basically, it's a slideshow to music, but that qualifies as a video in this regard. So what would you do with it then? It's important to get that out, share it with elected officials, share it with your partner agencies and organizations, and make sure that video isn't your entire CEDS. It could be, but I would just pull a segment out of it that might be most relevant or that can showcase a human interest piece. I always like to go back to the tried and true PR approaches. Perhaps there's a human interest story that really encapsulates an element or a strategy within your CEDS. Someone that has been, or an organization or a town that has been impacted by the strategies put into place. Many of you are at the end of your, I think they're a 3-year cycle, aren't they? You're at the end of your cycle, you're about to do another one. What can we look back on? And where are the success stories that happened as a result of your strategies? Because it takes a few years sometimes for a lot of this work to happen. But I bet there's a PR story, or I bet there's some element around that. And by sharing that success story or that that win that is a result of the CEDS, but it's allowing you to showcase a partner, a community. It's allowing you to showcase perhaps an organization or a business. And then those folks are more likely to be engaged and involved the next round. They're more likely to be a part of your process in the future. Another way you can get this information out is to mail a post. Maybe it's the cover of your CEDS, and you want to let people know it's ready and it's out there and you've got it on your website, or if they want to have an actual copy of it. I don't know if you're printing lots of copies of it, but you want to make sure people know you have this information. And maybe it's just one point. We have data that you need, or something like that. It's like a ransom note. we have data, and for just one small fee, you can have it. No, just kidding. But you want to make sure you're getting that information out there in kind of an alert fashion, like, hey, we've got something exciting to share. Another way to do it is to make sure we're reviewing our work. Who can find the typo? Raise your hand. Develop a one-pager. So you want to make sure that and that's really hard with the CEDS report, but at a glance, facts and stats. You know, what can you put on that one-pager that you can hand out to elected officials, or you can hand out to your partners, and then they're empowered to also talk about that strategic plan that they're a part of. They become an owner, they become empowered to share that information with others. Obviously, you're going to want to share it on social media, but are you sharing the whole entire plan? Probably not, unless you have it on a website, which we'll talk about in a minute, but maybe there are just some call out quotes that we mentioned earlier that you can share on social media, and then to learn more, you can direct them back to where you keep your CEDS, which is ideally on a page on your website and easy to find. So either you have a search function and you can type in CEDS, or you can type in regional economic development, you can type in economic development, and it's going to get to your CEDS plan. But what you don't want to do is have it on your website and nobody can find it because it's buried. And hopefully all of you have Google Analytics and you're tracking how people get to your website, but you want it displayed in a way that people can easily access that valuable information that you spent so much time on. And some folks that I know use live stories to display their CEDS plan. Others use Esri story maps or ArcGIS story maps, and those are really beautiful, very engaging CEDS when I've seen them displayed this way. I'm always amazed at these tools because we get stuck thinking, oh, I've got to work with a firm or work with a web development agency to create this whole standalone thing. And don't get me wrong, we love to help you, but we also want you to be able to get the information out without it impeding or overwhelming your budget. And so these are great assets that you can use and have access to. Just a few examples that work that we found either by going to Brett's site of CEDScentral.com or just Googling this one from River Valley Regional Commission in West Central Georgia. If you get the chance to look at it, I don't think we've linked it, but it's, I think, using the Esri story map, and it just is the scrolling, data-driven, visually engaging showcase of their CEDS plan. And then there's also a more traditional way of a PDF that was created, and this is Land of Sky. And we liked this one because it was less than 40 pages, which was great. And it could be just because of the number of counties they have. It could be that they had super heavy editing. But regardless, it was something that was easy for me to flip through because I was able, they used a mix of bulleted copy, infographics, tables and charts, and really great imagery to convey what their regional economic development strategy was all about.
Right. From a design standpoint, I thought this one did a great job of pretty much ticking all the check boxes that we've already discussed. So they used brand colors. They used again, they interestingly edited and formatted copy to make it easy to flip through and easy to navigate and read.
And obviously, using the CEDScentral.com, there are lots of case studies found on their site. The Eastern Upper Peninsula Regional Planning and Development Commission, that's a mouthful there, but their CEDS, I like that sort of hand-drawn imagery. It really is different than what we were talking about with the visual of the stock imagery or the high-resolution photography. I think that adds a very local, connected element to it as well. So it's really about whatever works. You can use a mix of photography, or you could do something that's more of an illustration like that. And going back just for a minute, when I was talking about communication strategies and videos and PR or postcards, all of those are strategies that will very much vary depending on who your audience is and what your goals are in communicating that information to them. It could be that it helps you with another funder, or it helps you secure a different grant. So it's going to be a different message than if it's as a data resource for an economic development group in your region. So just a caveat there I forgot to mention, just making sure you're tailoring that to your audience. And then also, I would be remiss if we didn't say you absolutely should be tying it to your brand strategy and making sure that who you are as an organization is also reflected in that CEDS. So it doesn't look like it's something completely different from your brand and your story. It accurately reflects who you are. And it can be very useful in contributing to your annual report that you do. It can also help in establishing you as a leader in economic development within your region, but making sure that you're always tying it back to your brand and your brand story and your position is critical, and making sure that the two match so that it doesn't just look like a document that anybody created, but it's a document that you created. And then finally, once you've gotten that CEDS together and you've gotten it out there, I always like to have a feedback loop. Ask for feedback, ask your stakeholders. What did they find most useful? Were they able to access information easily? Is there anything that they would have liked to have seen or read in a different way? If you do have it on your website, make sure that you're looking at your web analytics. Perhaps it's broken apart, or it's in a format that you can tell exactly which portions of that content people are accessing. With some of these tools that we've mentioned before, I don't think it would break it apart that much, but you would have a way of at least knowing that people are visiting to find that information. And then if you're sharing it on social media or even email, you're looking at analytics. If you're on social media, Facebook has analytics. All of them have some way of tracking what sort of engagement you got from the content that you shared. And 9 times out of 10, I'm sure if it's an image or a video, you're going to get a lot more engagement than if it's just a straight up post with a lot of words in it. People are not going to read it or engage as much, or they're not going to be likely to share it. You can also tag your partners that helped you along the way as you release it and it's official and you've gotten it out there. And then finally with email, if you're using a platform like Constant Contact or MailChimp or Emma, they all have tracking and analytic tools in the platform. And so you're going to want to make sure that you're tracking if they opened it, if you just put an email together, an announcement together about your CEDS, then try and vary it up, and maybe you just have an email about one aspect of it, or one particular strategy, or something related to one county within your region, and see what kind of engagement you get with each of those different approaches. And that then can help guide you in some of your future communication about the CEDS and in the development of the next round. Whew, look at us. I think we are at the end. I was worried we were going to finish at like 2:25. And it's,
we barely got it in.
Yeah, it's 2:45. So I think this is the time where if you do have questions, we're happy to answer them. And Brett, you may have some or items that we may have missed or overlooked. Let us know.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, Eric and Derek, thanks so much for a really great presentation here. I'll get a little bit of feedback here. I'm not sure if I'm coming out of your speaker as well. But you certainly practice what you preach with making a presentation visually engaging and interactive and interesting. So thanks for those slides. Again, all the information today will be shared afterwards with the group as well. So yeah, in the interim, please type in any questions that you do have for our presenters here. I've got a few here ready to go. And we'll have a little bit of conversation. We've got some time left here. So I guess the first question here is, we have someone who has a CEDS that has 6 goals, and under those 6 goals have 10 strategies each. So they've got 6 goals, 60 strategies. Are there any strategies that you might have to be able to get those into a document that's readable and engaging, but without overwhelming folks with all of that information?
First, this sounds like a math problem that my middle school child might have. 6 goals and 10 strategies.
If a train is leaving.
How do you get them into the plan? Get them in there very carefully. Well, I have some ideas, but Derek, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, for me, I'd like to see the messaging of the goals, but obviously, I'd say the six goals are the most important thing. Whether we're color coding each goal and then subset strategies, it's really, for me, it depends upon like the length of each of those strategies. Is this going to be like a bulleted list underneath a big headline? You know, it's hard to.
I think, yeah, you could do it a number of ways where you could, because I think for a lot of people, the strategies are going to be very important. So you could have the goal maybe on this running on the side of the page. How would I say that?
Run it vertically.
Run it vertically up the side of the page, and then your strategies are all kind of listed out in a very visual manner. Maybe there's a way to show it with an image, or there's an infographic type way to put that into action. So it's one goal and then strategy per page, or per 2. You might want to lay it out on 2 pages to give it a little space and a little room. And then I don't know if you're adding in there, how do you know if it's working or what your benchmarks might be, but that could be part of it.
Yeah, and again, it depends on the length of the verbiage for those strategies. But if you had that one goal that's super large, corresponds with an image on the page, and then even you could have a creatively bulleted list with like check boxes for your 10 strategies. They're kind of promoting that interaction. Like, all right, I'm going to apply this strategy.
Yeah.
Check it off. So yeah, there's a lot of fun ways to do that. Again, kind of going back to it, depends on A, what's the most important thing, and B, how do we want to guide the reader's eye through that content. Have them really identify with the goal in a way that makes them want to go down and read each individual strategy. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, really helpful. So we have another question here about someone who's looking to create a logo to help kind of brand their CEDS. I'm curious if you have any suggestions about kind of what goes into making a good logo really pop and resonate.
Personally, I think simplicity is the best thing to practice for a logo. Obviously, I would recommend, if it's not the strong suit of someone in your organization, finding someone that fits your budget and your aesthetic and understands you. to help you with that process. Logos are very, very important because a bad one can turn people off to even looking at your collateral before you even get a chance to grab the reader.
Yeah, and also I will go a little bit in the other direction. There's a tendency to create logos for new programs or CEDS or things like that that could almost take away from your logo. So if you've got a strong brand and a strong logo, then make it a companion piece to your brand and your logo,
right,
so that you're not working against each other. So people will identify your organization as the one that has done the good work to get to this point.
Great. And I guess on a similar note, there's a question about colors. Are there any colors that folks should avoid in terms of, you know, how it looks on the internet or on the printed page, or that might just be too much for a report like that?
As far as colors go, there's a lot we could say. Every color communicates something different. Whether, you know, blues and grays are more akin to being, you know, stable, safe. Greens are prosperous. Orange is exciting. Red has a lot of importance. You know, there's colors that you can use for your region, but, you know, each color kind of creates an emotional response. So that's something to consider when we're doing that. Also, you know, you just want to make sure that you know, you don't use too many colors. Usually with a logo, the strongest logos that I know are usually one or two colors. They're maybe coupled with a black or a gray, or, you know, you don't want to overdo it. So keeping it simple, keeping your color selection thoughtful, all that's very important.
Excellent, great. Well, we've got one more question in the queue. So if you have any other questions, please get them in right now. But it's one I think I might be able to answer here. Is a question about page length, if there are any requirements from EDA. And there aren't. I mean, EDA's perspective is making sure that this plan reflects your region and its goals, and if all of the key requirements are met, then you're good to go. And as Erica mentioned earlier, you know, we've seen some really powerful CEDS that are under 40 pages that make a great use of infographics and photos and other design to get all that information in and convey that to the reader. We've also seen a lot of the kind of charts and statistics and data that a certain segment of the population certainly wants to know and needs can live online. Doesn't need to actually end up in the final printed document as well. So if you want to be able to convey, you know, those numbers and statistics, there's certainly a place for them, but perhaps not in the actual document itself. Great. Oh, and we've got one more question that just came in. If I can read this quickly. Okay, it's a social media question about adding images to a post on social media. How much is too many? So I guess probably a question about Twitter or Facebook. You know, how do you make the most impact with images with social media?
You want to take that? Or
Yeah, sure. I was going to say, I guess that would be depending on the post. I think with most posts, one solid image that grabs attention would be ideal. Obviously, if you're posting about something that maybe an event or some sort of initiative that people attended, multiple pictures might be beneficial, especially if you're tagging people that were there.
But create an album for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you're just wanting attention on the post, then I think one strong image is the best practice there. If you're highlighting something that included, you know, people in your community, multiple pictures could be very helpful because you can increase your engagement by tagging those members, and then your post reach is much farther.
And also, you can also just test. You might do one image, as Derek suggested, and I'm a fan of that. And then a couple of days later, do 3 or 4 and see what happens. I know personally, when I see posts on social media that have multiple images, I kind of go, I don't want to go through all of them. I sound so lazy, don't I? But I think that we're just also fatigued with so much visual stimulation and images. However, if it's an album for an event, so maybe you had a community engagement meeting, then put that into an album with the location and make sure you're putting some time into describing what people are looking at. And then they will look through it. They will look through that album because they feel like, okay, they've really sorted through this. They've synthesized what I need to know, as opposed to just kind of throwing up every image and you've caught somebody with their mouth open with food in it and nobody wants to see that. So,
like a photo dump is never a good practice because, again, you may upset the people that are in the photo if it is one of those awkward pictures of someone at an event with their mouth open eating something, but it's not curated. And one thing I've always said is everything that you put out from your organization says something about your organization, whether it's a good quality piece or a bad quality piece, or something that if it looks like it was thrown together, people will assume that you threw it together. So curating those photos to where it makes sense, and this is all good, relevant imagery, and it's beneficial for me to post.
Great, excellent advice. So it looks like, that's it for all the questions here. Again, Erica and Derek, I want to thank you both so much for the presentation today. Lots of great information to mull over. Again, the recording will be available either today or tomorrow on our website, so hopefully you can share with other folks. I just want to turn it back to you for any final words of wisdom. There's been a lot of wisdom shared, but any kind of final thoughts from the two of you as we wrap up?
Thank you for asking us to do this. This was fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. Thanks.
And I hope we didn't overwhelm or tell you too many things that you already knew. But I think a lot of times with trainings and workshops, people expect something completely new and different and way off into some other stratosphere that we hadn't thought of before. But in reality, it is all about basics, and it is all about thinking about your audience and the strategy and what are you trying to accomplish and what do you want them to do or act upon as a result of your work. So when you put it in that light, it really does help things from a simple outline or a PowerPoint to a more complex CEDS. So good luck out there. Keep doing all the good work you're doing.
Wonderful, well said. Well, thanks again, and thanks to everyone for tuning in today. And please take a moment to respond to a short survey that'll pop up on the screen after we close out to really help us as we continue to develop our own content and programming as part of our Stronger CEDS, Stronger Regis program. So please share some feedback with us and look forward to seeing you at the next webinar down the road. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.